Hello, Dr. J here, and today in our fine class in conflict and mediation, we're going to discuss the role of emotions in conflict. I've subtitled this lecture, Feelings Are Facts, and if you don't get anything else out of this entire chapter, if you can only remember one thing the rest of your life, keep that one in mind. Feelings are facts, and because they are, you have to treat them like facts, treat them like any other fact in the entire conflict. It's an issue you have to deal with, and it's something you cannot push aside or say, let's be rational here because you're too emotional. All of that is counterproductive. You have to treat these as just another element of the conflict that has its place and has its reasons. Okay, starting off with that idea, let's dive in here. Number one, we are human and we have feelings. And I've got this picture here from the latest Star Trek movie with these young guys. I've tried watching the older Star Trek movies, and they're just a little too 1960-ish for my tastes, I guess, but I really liked the characters, and I think they've done a good job at recreating these characters. And what you had in that whole series, whether you watch the movies or the new movies, the old series, is you had three different kinds of people in the three main characters, Kirk, McCoy, and Spock from there. And you had Mr. Spock, who had no emotions. He was Vulcan, not supposed to have emotions anyway. He did have them because he was half human. But you had this person that was just totally 100% rational, unless they kind of lost it, and would treat everything rationally. On the other hand, you have McCoy. And McCoy was the scientist, yes, but he was the most emotional person on the whole crew, and he's the one that would really get upset about things and really get in somebody's face, get angry, and smiled the most and showed the most emotion. So here you have the non-emotional Spock, the very emotional McCoy, and right in the middle was Captain Kirk, who was that balance of rationality and emotion, and he had to make the decisions. And his character type is that, it's kind of an archetype even of how do you balance the two? How do you balance the human side with the purely logical side? And so that was kind of a running theme in the show. And that's, I think, what I appreciated about the show the most was that theme and the drama that it brought to the storylines every week. Well, we're like that. We're like Kirk in the middle. We have this rational side, we have this emotional side, and the emotional side is very real. People tend to lean one way or the other, perhaps. I, as a man, tended to lean toward the rational side. Mr. Spock was my hero at a very early age, about age 9. And I would try to never show any emotion. I thought that was just wonderful. And learn to hide everything I was feeling, learn to be literally filled with laughter but not let it out. Well, you can see how that worked out for me. It kind of shut down all of my expressiveness in emotion. And, of all the people you could have for a class to try to teach you about emotions in chapter 6 of this textbook, I'm probably the guy who's the least qualified in terms of life experience, because I've spent most of my life trying to not feel what I feel, trying to deny it, trying to hide it. And I don't think I'm alone among really mostly men, but let's say among masculine people. There are women who do this also. There are men that are very emotional and let all their emotions out. But we have these masculine and feminine types, and we have a culture that has taught us very powerfully that it's okay for women to express their feelings, to feel the feelings and to express them. It's not okay for men to express their feelings. And then we take that a step further and we get these assumptions in our own individual little heads that don't quite have things figured out, that men aren't feeling anything. But we know better. And that women are just totally emotional all the time. And we tend to polarize. We tend to go to the extremes when we make evaluations about people and issues like this, and it's not really that way. Men do feel emotion. They feel it very strongly. They've taught themselves to hide it and to bury it. And I think I tell the story about my friend at age 10 who told me, you got to quit crying, man. You know, we're playing football out here and you get smacked and you start crying and you got to stop that because boys don't cry. And so it took about a week, and I could get whacked pretty hard and I wouldn't cry anymore, and I figured out, oh, you don't have to just have that automatic response to getting hurt. Well, men have tended to do that, hide the emotions, we cover them up, but we feel them. Okay, so starting from that, and we'll get to this, we'll talk about that more in a minute. Some ideas about feelings here from early in the chapter. Feelings are facts, and you just have to manage them. I think we've covered that here. We are not strictly rational beings, we are emotional beings. And what is good about emotion, and this is where the chapter heads, it's a good thing. It's not something you have to overcome in conflict, it's just something to manage. Emotion increases our ability to meet challenges. Emotion gets us hyped up, if you will, to go after something. It motivates us. Emotion is motivating. And when you're not motivated, you don't do anything. You're not going to solve problems. You're not going to go after your dreams. We have to have emotion to be human. Without it, we're just not human. And we don't want to be not human. Not a good place to be. Some people may feel like my emotions get out of control, so I'm going to just suppress them and keep the lid on them, put them in that pressure cooker. Problem is, the situations of life or the heat on the stove, and they get fired up even more, and you know where that heads. Okay, so let's just move on here. Okay, some principles of emotion and conflict. Number one, we need emotion to get the job done. If you are not motivated by some emotion, you probably won't engage in the conflict as well, or you will not actually sit down and talk with the other party or parties about the problem, the conflict, the incompatible goals, and we need that motivation. And being angry about something helps us to do that. Being upset about it, feeling really good about a thing. In some cases, typically conflict we associate with the more negative emotions, but it doesn't have to be that way if you realize that the conflict is taking you somewhere that's a better place to go. Okay, second thing here is feelings alert you that there is a problem. It's a good indicator. I feel something, I'm upset about this, I'm avoiding somebody. Well, I've probably got a conflict that I haven't really thought through, and it causes me to sit down and think it through and then make that decision. Do I need to engage in this conflict? Is this going to go away on its own? Do I have a relationship with that person? Is this conflict going to really interfere with my goals? And yes, okay, let's deal with it. Well, the emotions started that whole process. Your emotions, the intensity will vary in the process of dealing with the conflict. You can start out being really upset about something, you can calm down, the anger may still be there, the hurt, whatever it is, but the levels will fluctuate as you go through a conflict. Okay, we experience emotion typically is either good or bad. We evaluate it as we're experiencing it. And these negative emotions, while they can have a good outcome, we don't like to feel those. Well, I don't. Some people like to get angry. They like to get worked up and just let it out and vent and really tell somebody off, and they feel good about it as it's happening. It's cathartic in a way. So it just depends on the person how you're experiencing emotion. Okay, we have these emotions because something is at stake in a conflict. If there were no stakes, if it wasn't important, we probably just wouldn't feel that deeply about it. The emotional level would be low. So when you have the emotion, the stakes are high, at least perceptions of them. The goals are important, the interference is real, and we feel threatened or whatever but something's at stake, and the emotions trigger that and let us know that it's happening. And finally here, and these concepts aren't really laid out in terms of one builds upon another. They're just kind of random and put there in the textbook. But relationships get defined by the type of emotion we feel. So with a good friend, I feel good about being with them. We have fun together. I feel positive emotions. Aha, friend. A coworker that I typically have conflicts with, we have incompatible goals consistently, and maybe that person feels threatened. That relationship turns into one of an adversarial type relationship, and it gets defined by my negative emotion towards that person, and I don't want to be around them. I'm afraid I'll say something that I'll regret, or start a conflict that we aren't ready to engage in yet, or that we've been avoiding, and that relationship gets defined just as much by that emotion. Okay, back to men here. I teach also the gender and communication class, and so I'm kind of bringing some ideas here. This is not from the textbook here, this slide. Men struggle with talking about their feelings, and I think perhaps the first reason is, first of all, men do feel everything. Let's say masculine people feel just as much as somebody who's really good at feeling it and talking about it. But we have spent, many of us, so much time suppressing and holding back and not displaying the emotion, except for some positive emotion, that many of us then, especially with the negative emotion, aren't in touch with those feelings as well. They're in there. We feel them. The hormones are going through the body, and we're perhaps afraid to express anger, ashamed to express any negative emotion that might make us look weak. And what we end up with are all these feelings, and we never talk about them, and we do not develop the vocabulary and the intellectual grasp of what is going on to accurately talk about them in the first place. Guys just don't talk much about their feelings. We talk about plans and goals. We talk about things that will increase our status in the community of men, or to hold our place in the community of men. We talk about sports and other activities like that because they level the playing field. We know there's status differences and we want to be more equal, so we talk about your team and my team and who's winning and all of that, and we have our favorite teams, and it gives us something to cheer for when we watch ball games together. But it's actually leveling the playing field, but we don't sit down after the game's off and talk about our feelings, and we're not good at it. We don't even have the vocabulary to do this, and it's probably because, when we're feeling good, we talk about it. We yell, holler, scream, everything. It's all good. But when we have the negative emotion, we don't want to look weak. And it's right back to that, men living in a hierarchical status world with a pecking order, and we've got to hold our place in it. And crying after I get whacked by playing football at age 10 lowered me in that hierarchy. My friend didn't like seeing that. He may not have wanted to be friends with a sissy anyway, and encouraged me to stop crying. Well, it's probably a really good thing he did for me. At the same time, it was probably a really bad thing he did for me. Should have let my father probably handle all that. Okay, with masculine people who are not talking about their feelings, like the guy in the picture here, I advise you to be patient. You show patience, even talk about it the next day, but if you sit there and wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm probably not going to talk about how I'm feeling. I still don't understand what I'm feeling. I'm feeling it, I don't like it, and I don't know what to say about it. And if you're pressing me to talk about my feelings, it's very difficult. You could ask questions. I probably do want to talk about it. I know I need to, but I'm afraid to. And like this situation there, it's just not happening though. Well, be patient. Give me time to process what I'm feeling, my anger, and with me, it's often the next day, and I'll have a situation like this with my wife, and the next day I will understand what I'm feeling. I usually wake up having slept on it, and I got it. And then I can talk about it a little bit, and I can tell her what I'm feeling, and I try to. And patience is probably a good approach here, to give him time to understand what he's feeling and to find the words to express it. Our chapter gives us a nice couple of pages, these lists of words about feelings, in this attempt to help this process with people and women too. A lot of women have trouble with this. My own wife is kind of this way. She's more masculine, growing up with three older brothers, and she wanted to do everything they did. And sometimes she has trouble talking about her feelings, and sometimes she really lets loose on me, and then I know exactly what she's feeling. And so it's interesting though, but she's much more in touch with it, much more able than I am. She's had more practice, and maybe it just comes down to practice, having the vocabulary and recognizing that it is good to get this off your chest and get it out there in the open, and let people you care about, that you want to have continued relationship with, know how you're feeling. Okay, emotions serve a lot of functions. Well, let me back up a minute. These lists of words about talking about your feelings, if those help you, great. If not, you're not going to be quizzed over those, but take a good look at that list and capture what they're trying to do there in helping people learn to talk about feelings. Well, you've got to have words if you're going to talk about it, and then really getting in touch with feelings and connecting them with these terms helps us to do that. Okay, emotions motivate us, and we've mentioned that. Emotions can be very specific to a function they serve for us. So anger probably comes around when somebody's interfering with our goals that are important to us, and anger motivates us to perhaps be more competitive. Now, there's kind of an evolutionary theory of emotion here, how they've served us, and if that helps you, great. But I think where we are today and how we got here, just understanding where we are is probably more important. So anger does help us deal with things. The positive emotions help us to approach life with a more positive attitude, but they all have their function. I chose this painting here for this slide because I think it's really capturing this idea of emotions being layered within us. They're not just one emotion, I'm angry. No, I'm probably angry because I first felt fearful. I'm threatened by something. I'm frustrated because of the threat and I don't know how to deal with it, and then I get angry about it because I can't do anything about it. And they work in chains here, they get layered together. It can be very complex, and recognize that, and it's part of what makes conflict, interpersonal conflict especially, difficult to manage because of the complexity that emotion brings to this. We've got a strategy a little later, we'll talk about how to try to deal with that. Our emotions are developed early in life, our responses to situations. We learn by the social learning theory, information processing theory. We watch what's going on around us. We see how others react when this situation happens, and we think, aha, that you're supposed to get angry when somebody does that. And we start training ourselves early, and then we build upon that early training our whole lives. And if you don't have good, healthy models, and one of the most interesting students I've had in this class was somebody who grew up in a family of lawyers and liked to argue, but had good dinner table conversations every night where they literally practiced arguing. Well, she got very good at arguing, and better than most people. She used it the wrong way to overpower people, but she did grow up in an area where argument wasn't seen as, oh no, we're just one step away from somebody really losing control and smashing something. And so her family wasn't afraid of that, and it was healthy argumentation. And it's probably very easy for her to kind of back off the competitive thing and be more understanding and working with people. Much harder for somebody that fears emotion and anger and frustration to tell themselves it's okay, calm down, tell people how you're feeling, and let's approach this conflict and try to solve it. Okay, these emotions become the building blocks of our personality. If you're a person that's frustrated all the time and always angry, you're going to come across as an angry person. If you're always in a good mood and happy, you're content with life, and you laugh a lot, that's the kind of personality you're performing for everybody. And we are who we perform. Shakespeare was right. The whole world's a stage, and we are but poor players strutting about and fretting our hour upon it. We perform our lives, we perform our personality, and if you start changing the performance, you change the character. Give it time, and you become that person you're performing. So if you're a person who's always frustrated, I used to be that way, angry often, change your performance, change your script, change your words. Get at the heart of what's really frustrating you, and see if you can deal with that. With me, it was being held back in a career and being broke because I was in construction and couldn't make a steady living. And that brought a lot of frustration into my life. And recognizing that and putting myself on a good path for financial management helped to resolve a lot of that frustration. And I didn't get angry as often and take it out on things or people. Okay. Emotions typically trigger behavior. We've talked about them being motivating. This is kind of the same idea that they're a trigger. An emotion will come upon me, and that makes me, in a sense, act for good or for something that's not so good. All right, some long sections in the middle of the chapter about negative and positive emotions. Read through these. Maybe you're somebody that really has suppressed emotion like I did. I think as I read through this, I thought, well, we all know this, right? Well, maybe not. If you're really in touch with emotions, what you feel, how you feel it, skim through this part. But if you're somebody that really has problems, really recognizing what you're feeling, read through this part closely. Negative emotions, anger, fear, hurt, sadness, which leads to depression, contempt, which goes along with resentment and hatred and being destructive. You have guilt and shame, which leads to regret. Some of these terms in the book are not emotions so much as actions, where joy and love, happiness lead you to laughter. Guilt and shame often lead you to regret. I wish I wouldn't have done that. I wish I would have done something different. I'm frustrated, and I wish frustration was on this list, or I should have just added it. But it comes out of probably it's a precursor to anger, fear that something is really going to go wrong for you again, frustrated that it's happening, feeling helpless because situations are swirling around you, not knowing what to do, leading to anger to cause you to do something. And those actions then, often attacking people, come out of those negative emotions. The emotions happen first, and then the emotion happens after that. Now, some people turn that around. You've heard of the facial feedback hypothesis. It could be a chicken or an egg situation, and if you start literally telling yourself, I'm having a good day, smiling, a lot of times you can physically change the emotions that you're feeling. There's a great video by Amy Cuddy, is her name, C-U-D-D-Y. It's a TED Talk. Look her up, and she talks about women at work taking the power pose and standing with your feet spread, hands on your hips, spread your feet a little bit, and stare at yourself in the mirror, look at yourself right in the eye, and hold that pose for 2 minutes. And it will give you more confidence, more assertiveness throughout the day. And women don't typically stand like that normally. But this is all some very interesting stuff that social psychologists have been figuring out, that literally with the actions of your body, you can change the emotion you're feeling. The emotion causes the action in one sense, or you can take more control over that with your actions. And if I'm feeling angry and frustrated, breathe deeply, as if I'm very calm, and maybe go for a walk and enjoy the blue sky for 5 minutes, and then come back and maybe I can address a situation. Sometimes I get emails that get me very upset, and I just need to do that before I respond out of an emotion and make a decision to do something without really thinking it through. And I think there's the real danger of the negative emotions, or even the positive ones. You didn't really think this through before you decided to punch your boss in the nose, did you? You lost your job. In the industry, the word got around. Actually, the boss called the police, and they've arrested you for assault and battery. Yeah, it felt good for about 5 minutes that you showed him. And now you have a hearing coming up, and the judge is probably going to give you probation, but you're going to be found guilty of that, and that goes on your record, and every employer does a police check now. Don't act before you think things through. Emotion, letting yourself be run by your emotion causes problems. Okay, positive emotions, joy. Hey, the same thing can happen. You know, if you're just feeling too much positive emotion and you decide to, you know, you're feeling attraction maybe, and you think it's love, and you ask somebody on a date, and you go out, and before you know it, you're in a relationship with somebody that maybe you don't have that much in common, and it's going to end up breaking up and causing some hurt later. You know, think things through. And if you need to do the action you need to get you into the right frame of mind to think clearly. I love this chart about the middle of the chapter called the mid-range zone. And it literally, we have this bell curve here of starting out with a low intensity of emotion, and you're not feeling much. What it does is it makes you unproductive in handling conflict. Now, as you start feeling more and having more intense emotions, you get to where you can deal with conflict very productively. You're motivated to do it, but you're not so upset that you can't think straight. Your emotion gets too high, that productivity curve starts dropping back down into the unproductive area, and you cannot deal with the conflict very well. You're going to do things that you wish you hadn't said and done. And so you want the emotion involved in your conflict management. It's good to deal with something while you're feeling. Maybe let the initial frustration or anger pass. Get a handle on yourself, but while you're still feeling it and care about the situation, then it's time to let that be the triggering event and go say to somebody, we call it the communication ritual, we need to talk. Everybody knows when they hear that, uh-oh, what's up? And you go sit down and calmly, rationally explain your problems. Feelings are facts. Tell the person, I'm very upset about this, and I'm not going to lose my cool over it, but we need to address this. We need to find a resolution to this problem. Okay, the book talks about being a warrior of the heart, using that metaphor, and I kind of liked it, and I've kind of scrunched everything from the rest of the chapter here underneath that heading. And it starts with being aware that other people are feeling emotions, aware that you are feeling things, and aware that these feelings are facts. They are part of the complex conflict equation. You're aware that there are layers of emotions, that things are shifting even as those layers are there and as you work yourself through a conflict. Be aware of that. Second thing is be compassionate towards people and the emotion that they're feeling. And if somebody's very angry at you, compassion doesn't seem like the right response, but I think in this sense, compassionate means you are feeling something of what they're feeling. You understand their anger, why they're angry at you. And yes, not too long ago, about 2 years ago, I did not do something I should have done, and my wife was very upset about that thing. And actually, she was probably more upset at a friend of ours who had helped this situation come about, but I didn't respond properly, and she was upset. She expressed it very strongly, verbally, and I had to calm down. I had to ask her to calm down too, and I had to not just react to it, but be compassionate and understand why she feels so strongly about it. Let her talk about it a while, and then let that motivate me to go do what I had to go do in the first place and apologize to her for not doing it. But some compassion there, feeling what she was feeling even, or at least understanding it. Sometimes things take courage. Hey, it took courage that day to go talk to that friend of ours that we were in a business deal with that went badly, and sit down and talk to him about it, make a decision of what to do, because I wanted to preserve the friendship. And now, 2 years later, I'm very glad I did. Actually, he severely overcharged us for something that he did for us, and we had paid him for part of it, and we didn't have enough money to pay for the rest, and had put it off for 6 months. And finally, I decided what he was charging us for was unfair. I felt that. My wife felt it much more strongly. She was upset at me for not dealing with it, not talking to him earlier, not nipping it in the bud when it happened, and getting ourselves into the situation where we depended on him and then he overcharged us. But we wanted to keep the friendship. And so I went and talked with him, and he got upset, very defensive, and defended his actions, and really left it at, fine, don't pay me then. But I knew if we didn't pay him, he would hold it against us. And I knew that we would need that friendship later on, and we have. So we ended up accommodating, being obliging, paying him, and at least we did it though after an open, frank discussion and everything was on the table. The friendship has been preserved. Now, 2 years later, the money wasn't that important, and he has saved our rear ends a couple of times since then in the same business. Okay, express your anger respectfully. If you're angry, it's don't yell at the person. And that time my wife yelled at me over that conflict. She actually turned and yelled at the window, kind of directing her anger at our friend. And I asked her to calm down, and she did. She was still very angry, and we talked about what she was feeling, and she was borderline respectful, but we've never yelled right at one another. And I can't say that's always been the case in my life. But you can be very angry and let people know that, but don't direct it directly at them as an attack, as contempt, as something to provoke. But you do need to let people know what you're feeling there. The next section I like, read this closely. It's called the XYZ formula, and it's about bringing clarity to feelings and actions. And it's very simple. A little hard to remember. I wish they had a better acronym for it or a better something, but take it and try to use this. And it's basically, when you do X, in situation Y, I feel Z. When you leave your dirty socks on the coffee table, in situation Y, right before we have friends coming over for dinner, I feel disrespected. And it's what this really, and if you want to simplify this and say, when you do X, I feel Z, that's fine. When you do this, I feel that. And really, you're trying to connect your feelings, your response to the other person with an action. You don't hate them. My wife just doesn't like it when I leave my dirty clothes all over the house. And she feels disrespected. And I need to change the behavior. If things go on too long and you let the negative emotions stir around too much, you can start letting some distortions creep in, and then the actual relationship can get very damaged. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is the damaging of relationships. And this XYZ formula helps you to do that by focusing on behavior and feelings, not you and my feelings. It's what you do that brings out these feelings. And it works the other way. When I did some dishes this morning before I got ready for work, and my wife came down about 30 minutes after I got up, and I had been working on the dishes. She caught me in the act. And when I do the dishes, she feels thankful that I appreciate how much work she puts into taking care of our house. We have kind of a traditional house, and I need to always appreciate the work she does. She thrives on that appreciation. And by helping out, she knows that I understand how much work it is. Okay, listen to people. And when they're upset and angry, don't you get upset with them. calm down and listen. Try not to be defensive. Ask them to use this XYZ formula even, and slow down, don't get angry. What did I do that has caused you to feel this way? Can you do that? Can you ask somebody that, and then listen? And see if they don't just calm down with you, with listening. My brother-in-law, my wife's brother, is a fireman. He was a fire captain in Phoenix, a chief, and rose up pretty high in the fire department before he retired. And I may have mentioned this in an earlier lecture. He would use big words to describe a situation, and he would get people to calm down using the large words, engaging their intellect, and it worked. But he was also listening at the same time and taking what could have been a shouting match back into a conversation where he's actually listening and responding. Okay, protect yourself when people are engaging in a shouting match. Do not put up with the abuse. And if somebody's, especially if they're attacking, sometimes people just need to vent, that's one thing. But when they attack you personally and start stretching the truth, exaggerating, calling you names, making character attacks, that's when you have to say, no, I'm not going to let you talk to me this way. We have to deal with this, but let's do it later after you're calm. And literally walk away from the situation, because they are not going to be reasonable or rational at a time like that. And they are feeling emotions, it's overstrong, it's too strong, it's overwhelmed them, they're acting, they are reacting, and it's not going to be fruitful at that point. Back off until it can be. All right, a little comment here on tactic at the end of the chapter, and it probably deserves more discussion. I hope we return to it in a later chapter, but fractionating is like turning something into fractions, cutting something in pieces. And what it's talking about is trying to take a conflict situation and, okay, you're angry about this aspect of it, you're frustrated about another aspect. And if you can verbally, as you're discussing issues and situations, isolate the different emotions and the different situations that have brought those emotions, that have triggered them, it helps you to not be so overwhelmed by layer after layer of fear and frustration and anger and contempt. But let's get back and let's try to talk about the frustration and isolate it, divide it out, fractionate it out, and discuss it, and start dealing with issues one at a time. Not ignoring the other things, not ignoring the other feelings, but not trying to deal with the whole complex mess at one time. There, you've got another metaphor out of me, a mess. That's, in my head, that's one of the reasons I like to avoid it, because I don't like messes. I like things neat and orderly. Well, the fractionating can help you to achieve that. It's a good tactic. All right, thanks a lot for watching. And again, I love this picture of two people with their brains intertwined here in a relationship with one another, with thoughts swirling all around them. And this is what relationships are really like. And we actually are part of one another and create one another in our relationships. Conflict is part of that. And embrace it in a sense. Let's work through it. Integratively work through it, compromise if that's not going to work, but don't avoid conflict unless you want the relationship severed and broken. And so feelings are facts. Keep that in mind, and if that's the only thing you remember from the whole chapter, you'll be quite a few steps ahead, because that one truth there will lead you to many of the things we've just been discussing the last few minutes. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you later.